We're the United States of America. Unity and oneness is what we're made of. One nation under God, it's plain to see. We're showing the whole world what a country should be. United we stand in America, hand in hand in America. Together as one in a land that we love. United we stand in America.
Good morning, everyone out there. Welcome to Changing Times. We are live at Axe Media Group headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. This is show number 227. We've been blessed 227 times. I am Lynn Morris.
And I'm Dr. Mary Byrne.
Yes, you are. And I tell you what, we have got a great show lined up today. This show is, we've had 226 other difference makers. Sometimes we have more than one difference maker on our show. But today we have what I'd call a quadruple difference maker, someone who I'm going to say, we're going to talk about some books and things that he's done, but Bill Federer. Good morning, Bill.
Hey, great to be with you.
Well, I tell you what, we are proud that you're with us today, and we appreciate you so much. Folks out there, I'm hoping that right now, Bill, we have people in all 50 states watching our show and several countries. So we've got a fairly large audience, and we appreciate everyone that's watching today. I'm thinking that a lot of people will know who you are. They know your name. They know who you are. But if they don't, I'm just going to say this, and you might add something if you want to, but I think you're a walking, talking encyclopedia
Of American history.
Of American history. And not only do you, and the importance of that is extremely important, because just like my old good friend Dee Wampler, you knew Dee Wampler, he was always having books, history books that he and I learned in school, and how he showed every year how they progressed and changed history. They omitted history. They changed the words in history and things like that. And we know you're not supposed to do that. You can't learn if you don't have the real history. So you are a scholar in history, but not just American history, government history, the Bible, all the history of the Bible. Because if you don't understand the Bible and how the life is playing out, you're not going to be with it, okay? And so all those things, and then obviously you're a speaker. You go around, you do podcasts, you've got TV shows, you've got everything, and then you've got a Missouri tour. We're going to talk about. Mary can talk about that. We know you're going to be in Missouri here in October, and we'll talk about you're even going to be in Springfield. So it's really good. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't know whether you want to talk about part of the message you're going to talk as you're going around in Missouri, or what your topic is today. I kind of looked, and I'm going to let you choose what you want to tell the people. I know everything you say is going to be extremely important, and I'm encouraging people to get a piece of paper, get a pen, and write down some notes, write down some comments of what Bill Federer says, okay? He never looks at a piece of paper. He's not like me. I've got my notes. He doesn't do that. It all comes from his head. I wish I was more like that. He can just tell you so many things. And what he's saying today is extremely important if we want to save our country. If we want to save our country, save our republic, save everything that all the founding fathers and all the veterans and people have fought for over all these years, I think you better be listening. Okay, Bill, so let's go ahead and let you get started.
Well, hey, it's a tremendous honor for me to be on with you. And I do want to mention my website, AmericanMinute.com. And then years ago, Charlie Kirk asked me to be a part of their Turning Point education. So it's turningpointed.com. And I produce a weekly video called How We Got Here. And anybody can sign up for it. You go to turningpointed.com, look under resources, and scroll down on the page somewhere. You'll find out how we got here, and put your email in. And so I go through world history and did one on the history of Islam and the history of socialism, and matter of fact, have a book on socialism, the real history from Plato to the present. And I'm going to be sharing some of the topics in my time in Missouri. One of the big picture items is that the most common form of government in world history is kings. They go by different names: Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Tsar. And a king is a glorified gang leader. And it's a hierarchical system. If you're friends with the king, you're more equal. If you're not friends with the king, you're less equal. You're an enemy of the king, you're dead, or you're a slave. And as the centuries go on, the kingdoms keep getting bigger and bigger. From Nimrod and the Pharaohs and the Assyrians and Babylonians and Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, because with the latest military advancements, kings can kill more people. And with the latest technological advancements, kings can track more people. It's interesting that around 2 BC, Augustus Caesar wanted a worldwide tracking system. It was called the census, a tax enrollment. If he could have had access to 5G and cell phones and facial recognition software, I bet he'd been tempted to do that. Kings want to censor what you say. The King of England passed the Writs of Assistance, where they could raid anybody's house and seize all their possessions just on a suspicion of being disloyal to the king. I was recently in Seoul, Korea. Actually, I was there with Charlie Kirk 4 days before he got shot. And we were meeting with a pastor, Son. And when the new president was pushing the trans agenda, Pastor Son organized 1 million Koreans to protest. They filled the streets of Seoul saying, we don't want this trans agenda. Well, the new communist-leaning president had his house raided, his computers and cell phones seized, and filed 22 lawfare charges against him. And we're meeting with Charlie Kirk and Mina Kim, who was interpreting, and Pastor Rob McCoy. And he said how they're threatening to arrest him. And Charlie said, if they arrest you, I personally am going to call President Trump. He pulls out his phone. He starts texting Marco Rubio. And 2 days after we left, they arrested that pastor. He is in jail right now. Charlie's team said, we have one last event in Utah, and then we're going to focus on this CCP infiltration of South Korean politics and weaponizing against the Christians in the country. Unfortunately, he didn't survive that last student event in Utah. But whenever you have a king, a dictator, they want to silence opposition. And so that's what we experienced in America under a couple previous administrations, and we're trying to get back to normal now. But you look at Europe. I was recently with a Anglican pastor, Calvin Robinson, and he was there in London, debated at the Oxford Union, and he is now pastoring in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He says, I can't go back to England. They'll arrest me. He says 16,000 people are in prison in England, some for simply liking a post. You know, the little thumbs up? Just by liking a post, they're put in prison for questioning the trans agenda or being upset that immigrants are raping girls. And he says they're letting murderers and rapists out of prison so they can make room for more people. This is London. This is England. So we see this weaponization against free speech happening around the world.
That's why the Puritans left. That's why
Yeah.
the Pilgrims left. It was the very same thing. You know, your thought control. You're not allowed to read the Bible yourselves. And so not much has changed. This whole idea of elitism and taking away your humanity so they can control you. England is still going through that, and they have a recognizable king. And we have it here in America. We have self-appointed kings who, I like the title of your tour that you're having in Missouri, How Our Nation Was Brainwashed, because we still have people trying to be kings, even though we call this a republic. And what I appreciate about your writing is that you've been the repository of real American history despite the progressive rewriting history, you've been the undercurrent. It reminds me of when the Lollards preserved the Bible. Um, it was 100 years underground, and then it surfaced again, and the king couldn't stop the publication. That's it's kind of like what we're going through now. History's repeating itself. It's just I think the format and the form is different, but it's the same oppression of thought. And with God as he's the creator of liberty. Liberty is his idea. That's what the book of Exodus is about. And we have to remember that that's his idea, and he will always help us defend it if we ask him. So take it from there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you bring out interesting. The Lollards under John Wycliffe, they were hand copying copies of the Bible because the printing press had not been invented yet. I know it's hard for us to imagine that. Once the printing press was invented, there was this seismic shift because you could have the Bible in your own language instead of a handwritten copy in Latin. Everyone could own their own copy, and so the biblical knowledge of the congregation could rise. And you began to have people like John Calvin saying, we're subject to the men who rule over us, but subject only in the Lord. If they command anything against him, let us not pay the least regard to it. It's like, there's like a caveat to obeying the government. It's sort of like children obey your parents. But what if there's a bad parent who tells the kid to sell themselves into prostitution and kill the neighbor? Is the child supposed to obey that parent? No, the child obeys the parent as long as the parent's telling them to do something that lines up with God's word. You obey the government as long as the government's telling you to do something that lines up with God's word. I mean, why would God tell you to do something in his word and then tell you to submit to a government that tells you not to do what he just got done telling you to do?
And
so
it's what I appreciate about history is if you know history like the Lollards, you know that there's hope, because it's just like in the Old Testament, the stump will have a branch grow again, and that's God's pattern, even for thousands of years. You may be knocked down, but you're never knocked out. And you can, God always rises again, but you have to have that hope. So, and history teaches us that. That's why I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the Old Testament. So one of the things that I highlight is the before King Saul and after King Saul. Mm-hmm. So the most common form of government is kings, and around 1400 BC, you have millions of Israelites come out of Egypt, and for 400 years, there's no king. It's a total anomaly in world history, millions of people and no king. And it works because every citizen is taught the law, and they are personally accountable to God to follow the law, right? You're about to steal. Nobody's around. They think God's watching me. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. Creates a tiny thing in your head called the conscience. Mm-hmm. If everybody believes this, you can maintain order with no king. And it worked for 4 centuries until the priests went woke and stopped teaching the law, and every man did what's right in their own eyes, with sodomites, raping concubines, and they all go to Samuel the prophet, and they say the self-government system's not working. We want to be like the other countries. We want a king. And they get King Saul. Now, why is this story important? Because the kings of Europe looked to the Bible, but they looked to the King Saul and after. Mm-hmm. And the Puritans that founded New England looked to the pre-King Saul. It's the difference between a republic, the Hebrew Republic, and a monarchy. So King Saul is the divider between England and America, right? Again, the kings of England look to the Bible, but they're the royal gang leader. You do what I say. And the Puritans that founded New England looked to the pre-King Saul period. And so what happened was the Reformation begins. Now you have a printing press. Now people are reading it, the Bible, and they're comparing King Henry VIII, who's divorcing and beheading his wives, to what's in the Bible. And they want to purify the Church of England, so they're nicknamed Puritans. And the king doesn't like him, persecutes him. And there's another group called separatists. And in Scotland, there's another group called Presbyterians, where they elect elders, and then the elders meet and they agree on a covenant. And so King James said, I will make them conform or I will harry them out of the land. It's like, I'm going to cancel you unless you obey and submit to the government. And so the Pilgrims flee to the New World. Interesting. They were going to go to Virginia and submit to the king's government. They get blown off course to Massachusetts. And there's 102 of them in the boat, and nobody's been picked by the king to be in charge. And there's like this emergency. And they say, well, we don't want to be lawless. And they come up with the Mayflower Compact,
Right.
which says
Because
what?
they knew the compact between God and man, and they wrote one among themselves, and that was the beginning of the American mind.
Yeah, they took their covenant church form of government and they made it their civil government. This is the first time this happened in world history. It's a polarity change in the flow of power. Instead of top-down rule by kings, it's bottom-up rule by just the 102 of us. And so this covenant form of government in New England, you literally had pastors and churches founding cities. So Pastor Roger Williams in the First Baptist Church in America founded the city of Providence, Rhode Island. And Pastor Thomas Hooker and the First Congregational Church founded the city of Hartford, Connecticut. At this time in world history, you had Muslim sultans of the Ottoman Empire, Iranian Persian shahs, Chinese emperors, Japanese emperors, Korean emperors, Indian maharajas, Russian czars, Mongolian khans, African chieftains, kings of Spain. The whole world's basically kings. And here they got this little experiment in America where there's no king, and you have pastors and churches founding cities. It's a polarity change. Instead of top-down rule by kings, it's bottom-up rule by we the people, and that developed into what we call the Constitution.
Right.
There's a great quote from
my one of my favorite stories is that the King George called the American Revolution the Presbyterian Revolution. And they were after the Black Robe Regiment, because the Black Robe Regiment was preaching liberty according to the book of Exodus. And he said, no, we can't have that. That's competition to my divine right. And so he tried to eliminate us. But
yeah, the Presbyterians were known as the opposition party to the king.
Yeah.
Right, the king was Anglican, and the Scottish said, look, we'll acknowledge you as the king because you're Scottish and we're Scottish, but we don't want your bishops. We don't want your top-down book. Of matter of fact, in the 1660s, the king insisted on Scotland, the Presbyterians, using the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. And in St. Giles Cathedral, a market woman named Jenny Geddes hurls her three-legged stool, and it whacks into the minister and knocks the book out of his hand. And then people start throwing stuff, and it turns into a riot. And so the king sends up an army to force them to use the Book of Common Prayer. It's called the Bishop's War. The people say, let's just meet in a field. And so they're meeting outdoors. Well, the king sends his army into the fields and actually passes a law on that anyone who even hears a sermon it's punishable by death. So they call it the killing time. And so this gives you a little setting of why the Pilgrims fled to America and the Puritans. But they set up a republic. So a monarch. So this is interesting. Romans 13, let everyone be subject to the governing authority. Well, who's the governing authority in a monarchy? It's the king. Who's the governing authority in a republic? It's the citizens. The politicians are your servants, your public. You hire them, you fire them. Mm-hmm. So when a pastor says Christians are not supposed to be involved in politics, you have to ask them if they know the difference between a monarchy and a republic. Mm-hmm. In a monarchy, the king is the authority and you submit to him. In a republic, the citizen is the authority. The politicians are your servants. You hire them, you fire them, right? And so it's sort of like in the Bible, if there's a child, there's one set of verses on, children obey your parents. But what if the child grows up and becomes an adult and becomes a parent? Well, there's other commands in the Bible to the parent. What if there's a single man? Well, there's commands in the Bible to be abstinent. Well, happens when he gets married? Well, then he's supposed to be faithful to his wife. There's commands to the servant. But what if the servant gets free and becomes a master? Well, then there's different commands. So there's commands to the body of Christ when you're living under a monarchy. You got to submit to the king. But what if it switches and those Christians are living in a republic? Well, there's different commands. Participation, right?
That's
The
right.
people are the king. And so
And
when the pastor in a republic says, don't get involved in politics, he's producing a negligent king.
yes,
He's telling you to be lazy. And if you are silent when there's evils going on, you're giving your consent to the evil. Like in a wedding ceremony, if you're silent, you're giving consent. Well, if the church members in a republic are silent, they're giving consent to all the evil out there. They're inviting the judgment of God on their heads.
that's right. And it's in the book of Exodus, the description of teach everyone the law, select out of that group of uh, educated people the ones who will become your judges. And um, so what God is describing there is the Hebrew Republic. I actually have a book written and published by MIT Press, so it's a secular uh, publishing house. But the reality is, even the secular academes recognize that the idea of the republic that America was based on came from the book of Exodus. So there are biblical principles in our Constitution that are not explicit, but were very much present in the discussion when the Constitution was written. So, like it or not, even in a secular society, you have to acknowledge the origin and the source of the ideas, and that was the Old and New Testament. So,
Yeah, the scholars will say Rome, Athens, Jerusalem. Right.
mhm,
So those are the three cities. So our founding fathers did look back to Rome. Rome had 600 senators and they had a republic. And they did look back to the Athenian democracy with about 6,000 citizens. But ultimately, they looked back to ancient Israel, that first 400 years out of Egypt, before they got a king called the Hebrew Republic.
mhm,
And uh, so I make a little distinction. The word democracy has two definitions. One is a reference to popular sovereignty, where the population, the people, are sovereign, are king, and they rule themselves. And that was highlighted by Harry S. Truman's inaugural address during the Cold War. And he says, and the communists, they want this, and in democracy, we believe in freedoms, right? So that's the general definition. But as an actual functioning form of government, a democracy only worked on a small scale. Demos means people, Krasi means rule. And so in Athens, 6,000 citizens, every citizen had to be at the market every day to talk about every issue. And if you didn't keep up with what's being talked about today, you're called an idiotus, an idiot.
mhm,
And but it could grow no larger than a city because you physically had to be there. A republic is where you take care of your family and your farm, and you have someone in your place that goes to the market every day. They're your representative. So republics could get larger. Easy way to remember is republic begins with the three letters REP, and representative begins with three letters REP.
that was you,
Now in
Lynn.
America, we have a constitutional republic.
Uh-huh.
So
Hey, Bill, I want to say one thing real quick. I really appreciate what you said about churches getting involved. I think in today, and I know everything you said is important. I hope people are writing these things down. But with the way the world is today, and how divided our country is, and how divided the whole world is, it's more important than ever. I'm encouraging because of what you said. I'm encouraging every member of every church in this country to, if your minister, if your pastor is not telling you what's going on in this country and the world, and getting politically involved, they're going to the government can actually do away with churches. I mean, we could actually we saw that with COVID. We saw that, hey, you can't go to church. And then we tried to go and have church services in a parking lot. No, you can't have church services in a parking lot. And people obeyed that. Well, let's not do that again. And let's ask the pastors and ministers to teach us the Bible, but tell us what's going on. We've got to be involved with the government.
Mhm. I was referring to Lynn having been an elected state representative. He served 8 years as a representative of the people up in
thank you,
Jefferson
Lynn.
City. Mhm.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lynn.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate you serving the state of Missouri like that. That's a tremendous blessing.
Yeah.
You know, politics. The word for city in Greek is polis, like Minneapolis, Indianapolis, and politics is simply the business of the city.
Mhm.
Politics, right? And then policy is what they set. Um, and it is interesting that the name of citizen in Greek is polites. It's like polite with an S on the end, polites. And then how are they supposed to treat each other? Well, politely. And if they don't do that, then there are police. um, but uh, but that word polites, it doesn't just mean an inhabitant of the city. It means a co-ruler of the city. And you don't just have the blessing of being the co-ruler, you have a responsibility. So it's not just, oh, I voted and did my thing. No, you have responsibility for the whole thing. I mean, it's more than just your once every year or two casting a vote. No, you have to be involved in it every day, discussing, keeping up with the issues. And so in Athens, the 6,000 polities, the Latin word for polities is citizen. City means city, and zen means an inhabitant of. But when they would call all the citizens out of their homes to the agora marketplace, that collection of citizens for the purpose of deliberating on policy is called ecclesia. Ek means out of, and ecclesia means a calling out of their homes to the marketplace to discuss these important issues. Philip of Macedon is getting an army together to attack. What are we going to do? And Jesus chose that word when he said, upon this rock, I'll build my ecclesia, my called out ones, the body of those called out of the world, called to Christ, right? And so it's a body. Everybody has to be a part, an eye, an ear, a foot, right? We all contribute. We got different gifts and talents. And so this word ecclesia is translated church, but sometimes when people think of church, they think of the building. When Jesus said ecclesia, he's talking about the body of the called out that are responsible for being in charge. And so again, monarchy versus a republic. For most of world history, other than ancient Israel and a little bit of the Greek and the Romans, for most of world history, you had kings. And so America, we had founders, the Puritans, that looked back to this pre-King Saul period of Israel's history. But as Lynn said, the most of the world persecutes Christians. I talked to somebody in India, a missionary, and they put wells in villages. And he says that you have the caste system, and the bottom caste are the Dalits, called untouchables, and they got to take care of the sewage and the garbage. Nobody will even touch them. And the other castes will rape the women. He says that if the women, and a lot of those poor people convert to becoming Christian, and they don't like that. And so if they're poor, they have to walk to another village to get water. And he says the women get raped on the way to the well, and they get raped on the way back. And he says, if we can build a well in the city, in the little town where they're at, they don't have to walk and have that happen to them. And he says that when they take menial jobs as maids in some, Indian or Hindu or Sikh home, the men of the house rape the cleaning lady. And they have no problem with it in their culture. In most, in Islam, if you're a woman or a Christian, you're a second-class citizen, called the dhimmi is the term. In China, they have the 100 family names, right? They were the elite family names. And of course, now it's the CCP. If you're a CCP member, you're worth more. If not, you're worth less. The same thing in North Korea. Same thing with the Ayatollah in Iran. Most of the world, it's a hierarchical structure, and they persecute people that don't surrender their beliefs to the state. And Christians are persecuted. Why? Because Christianity has one basic idea. I mean, lots of basic ideas. We're sinners, and Jesus died on the cross to pay for our sin, and through Jesus we get to heaven. But politically, it's the concept of the individual, that you have a worth, irregardless of what group you belong to, because you're made in the image of God, and this God is not a respecter of persons, so we're all equal.
Mhm.
Those concepts don't exist in other cultures, right? A Muslim male is worth more than a Muslim female, who's worth more than a kafir infidel. And so they were put into our Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. That's a Bible idea, and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. So we have biblical principles embedded. And then another biblical principle is checks and balances. That's based on this concept that we're sinners. and no matter how good somebody is, if you give them power, they're always going to want to prefer their family and friends. And then they're always going to be tempted to weaponize the government against their opponents. And so the idea is, let's have checks. Let's pit the selfishness in one branch of government against the selfishness in the other two branches, sort of create a three-way tug of war. But it's based on this idea that we're sinners. Other cultures don't have that. And as a result, they end up getting turned into dictatorships. And so I like to highlight the role of faith that's embedded in our belief system in America. And, bottom line, it's a bottom-up form of government where the rest of the world's top down. And we want to, Proverbs says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children.
And, I saw you, the camera panned to you at the celebration of life for Charlie Kirk. But what I hear people talk about most is all of the government officials who proclaim Jesus as Lord, and that it's God's plan to preserve America, and they're just working within the government to execute that plan. They were really comforted by the pouring out and the public proclamation from people in our government to say, no, we're here with Charlie. We're all on the same page. So,
Hey, Bill, one of the things that, and you're talking about Charlie, I know Dr. Mary and we had a great show to honor Charlie's life, and the thing I get about you, and people need to understand this that's watching, and please, we got a lot of people who watch this show over and over again. So maybe they haven't seen it. They're going to watch it later on. That's not live, and they'll watch it for weeks. This show will be watched for weeks. Here's the thing. You're telling the truth. When you tell the truth, it's always going to be told the same every time. You don't vary the truth. The truth is the truth. And that's what Charlie Kirk did. He told the truth. And he also gave you an opportunity to debate the truth. And he was not rude about it, like some people that I've been involved in. I'm in county politics now. And sometimes people are rude when they debate or want to question you. But you're not that way. You're telling the truth. History, and the history is the truth. The history is the truth unless somebody's trying to alter the history. And so that's why I appreciate you. That's why their listeners should appreciate you. That's why they'll appreciate Charlie Kirk forever and his organization. So the truth is what, and interesting, people are fighting today. We have a group of people that are fighting the truth.
Well, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. And I think, he's always been controversial because evil doesn't want that truth known. And so there will always be the controversy until the end of time. And that's going to come. I'm not saying it's immediate, but that's the plan. But yeah, we should anticipate we're going to get resistance, and it's the Christian's job to resist back. That's the problem. You don't roll over and just pray it away. Faith without works is dead. You have to work. You have to take action. So,
I knew Charlie for about a dozen years. 2014, I spoke in Robinson, Illinois, at a civic center, about 500 people, and I was the big speaker, and they had this teenager was the warm-up speaker. And he was 19 years old, taking a year off between high school, and then he was so good. I couldn't concentrate on my notes. I usually review my notes before I get up. And that was Charlie Kirk. And as the years went on, we'd end up sharing, being on, speaking together, Eric Metaxas, Tucker Carlson. And then I was on his show several times. One time we were in Wyoming for the funeral of our mutual friend, Foster Freeze. And we spent 2 hours in the car together, driving through the Wyoming mountains. And he was asking me all these history questions. And he asked my wife and I, with Pastor Rob McCoy as his pastor, to move out to Phoenix to help with starting Turning Point Faith. And my wife said, "We just moved to Florida and I don't want to move again." And but then a year later, they asked us to be a part of Turning Point Education. So that's the turningpointed.com. And I remember being at dinner with Charlie and Rob McCoy and Rob's son, Mikey, who was Charlie's right-hand man. And we were just, talking this vision. And then Rob says, "Well, Charlie, what are your plans for the weekend?" And Charlie said, "Oh, I'm going to fast and pray this weekend. I have some big decisions I need to hear from God on." It's like, here's a 26-year-old saying his plans for the weekend are fasting and praying. And another time, I was with my son and Charlie, and we were talking about skiing and stuff like that. And Charlie said, "Oh, I don't do those risky sports." He said, "Too many people have invested too much in me for me to do something stupid and get injured." It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And
Well, Charlie was one of a kind. He was the real deal. And one of the things interesting right now is every time I listened about one of the Turning Point meetings, events that are going on, they're having tremendous crowds. So they've increased the number of participants, and no one will ever beat Charlie. However, thousands of little Charlies, young people that's going to actually grow up and expand. And actually, I think the movement is going to be larger and greater and more successful than ever.
Well, let's talk about your tour.
Yeah.
The 2025 tour, Missouri tour. Bev Allen from Liberty Links is the organizer of all this. We really appreciate all of her work. We're going to see you here in Springfield. Actually, one of my organizations, the Conservative America's Club, is co-hosting you to come here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure for sure. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about the topic, how our nation was brainwashed. I call it psyops. I don't know if it's a synonym for what you want, but yes, we've been brainwashed. What we're being told is not true. So can you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So PSYOP stands for psychological operations. And, the Karl von Clausewitz, 18th century military theorist, gave the purpose of war. The purpose of war is to get your opponent to submit to your will. Pretty simple, right? You go through battle strategies and weapons, but the goal, get your opponent to submit to your will. Well, what if you can get him to submit without fighting? And so Sun Tzu's Art of War, 5th century BC, said supreme excellence in a commander is to get your opponent to surrender without a fight. And now it's called 5th generation warfare, where you get your enemy to surrender without them even being aware that they're in a war. If the goal is to get them to submit, why even let them know there's a battle going on? Just get them into fear and get them to give up their freedoms. That's right. Have some emergency, and then they'll give up their freedoms, and then they'll never get them back. And so this,
the strategy has been never waste a crisis. And the end of that phrase should be never waste a crisis we've created. Right? Because that's how you get other people to submit to your will. You've created the crisis to get them to surrender those freedoms and their rights. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's Machiavelli in the 1500s. Italy was a bunch of city-states that fought. And Machiavelli thought if one prince could control all the city-states, it would stop the infighting. So he writes a book called The Prince, where he advocates the ends justifies the means. The end of one prince controlling all of Italy is such a good end because it'll stop the infighting that any means necessary to get there is justified. Lie, cheat, steal. So if a prince wants to conquer a city in his quest to unify Italy, and the city does not want to be conquered, they would hate him. But if the prince pays criminals to kill cows, burn barns, smash windows, set things on fire, the people will cry out for help. The prince will come in and get rid of the very criminals he paid to create the crises. Nobody will know the better for it, and everyone will praise the prince as a hero. So it's called Machiavellianism, where you create or capitalize on crises to consolidate control.
Well, gee, Saul Alinsky said the same thing.
Wow.
He didn't credit Machiavelli, but basically he said you become disruptive enough and create the chaos that people will do anything to get you to stop.
Yeah, and then you have Hegel.
Mhm.
Germany was a bunch of kingdoms, Bavaria, Saxony, and they didn't get along. And he thought, well, if one prince could control all these German kingdoms. So he takes Machiavelli, turns it into a nice, neat triangle called dialectics. And the
Mhm.
one corner of the triangle is the thesis, the opposite corner is the antithesis, and the top corner is a synthesis. It sounds complicated, but it's not. You start off at the status quo and you create a crisis that's real bad, and everybody will panic and surrender their freedoms to settle for an answer that's just half as bad. And
Yeah.
then that becomes the new thesis starting point. They create another crisis that's real bad, and everybody panics, surrenders some more of their freedom to settle for an answer that's just half as bad. And you keep doing this until you move across the page from the people having freedom to a dictator controlling them.
And Cass
And
Sunstein called that nudging.
yeah,
Right. So we have it here in America. It's Cass Sunstein, of course, was in the Obama administration, and he called it nudging, moving people to think your way in little steps. But Marx took it from Hegel, right? He took his cues from
yeah.
Hegel.
And so Marx's idea is, how do you create a crisis that's real bad? Well, you send in agitators, agent
Mhm.
provocateurs, community organizers, labor organizers, and their goal is to create a crisis.
Right.
And they would pit so that it's called critical theory. You go into a country
Right.
and you observe the groups, ethnic groups, Bosnians, Croats, Serbs, religious groups, Sunni, Shia, Orthodox, economic, racial, and you call some victims and others oppressors, haves and have-nots. And then you organize protests and riots and violence. Why violence? Because when there's bloodshed, people want to blame somebody for it. And so we have this emotion, this flood. And so you co-opt the media to blame the leader of the country for all the problems. And when his popularity falls, you can do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet.
And hence
And
critical race theory in the United States, right? And Black Lives
yeah,
Matter to create the chaos. And
yeah,
so it
that
was
was
a deliberate manipulation of racial tension to do exactly what you're saying.
yeah. If
Hey,
you the
hey, Bill, we're going to kind of run out of time, but I want to make sure you're going to be here on Saturday, October the
18th.
18th at 9:30 at the Library Center in Springfield, Missouri. Anybody in Southwest Missouri, it is first come, first served. There are limited seats, but I know it's going to be a full house. And you've got, I think,
Well, we
11.
did reserve the auditorium room that seats 100.
Yeah.
So we're
So, and you're going to have 11 stops in 5 days. So you're going to be extremely busy in Missouri. Let's tell us our website one more time. Tell the people your website. They want to get a hold of you because we just heard a little tiny glimpse
Mhm.
of your knowledge this
Mhm.
morning. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, Bev Allen is the one that has the master list of where I'm going to be and when. And I don't know if you have her contact,
I
Yes.
do.
but
Yes.
if you can, go ahead and share that.
Yeah, we've been sharing that,
Yeah.
but how did this people your website? How do people just get a hold of you and find out more about your books, more about what you're doing? Um,
Well, thank you. It's AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. And I send out emails where I talk about history, but it always has something that is applicable to today. I tell people that history is not prophetic, but it is predictive. Past
Mhm.
behavior is the best indicator of future performance. Winston Churchill said, the further back you look, the further forward you're likely to see, right? So you get this insight. But AmericanMinute.com, And then one of my books is called Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present. And the subtitle is How the Deep State Capitalizes on Crises to Consolidate Control, which is what you were mentioning there with the psyops and so
That's
forth.
right. And I have that book. So I want you to know you're in my reference library.
Yeah, my wife and I, we downsized from a large home on the golf course to a smaller, much smaller place as we've gotten older. And my wife said, "You don't need to buy any more books. We don't." We had a hard time trying to figure out how to downsize a house 3 times larger than we moved into. But I love your books. I love everything that you've said. So we're going to talk about sponsors. Don't go away. We're just going to talk about sponsors real quick, and we'll give you the last word. So we have 2 great sponsors to make this show possible. Brad Pistow, certified fiduciary financial planner located in Ozark, Missouri. He has written 2 books, not 30 like you, but 2 books, best-selling books on Amazon on retirement planning. First one is called Safe Money Matters, and the second book is Bulletproof. And I'm extremely proud to tell you that he's not only one of my best friends, but he's my financial planner. He's my retirement specialist. I've used him. He has figured out a way for all people to never run out of money before they run out of their life. He is licensed in almost 30 states now, so he's still got a few to go. He has associates in all 50. He contributes to Wall Street Journal, to USA Today, business financial section. He speaks all over the country just like you do, Bill. He's always somewhere talking and helping people about retirement planning. I highly recommend this guy because he's made me money while I'm trying to think about retiring. He's made me money on everything that we've ever done. And so I highly recommend him. His phone number, 417-581-9222. 417-581-9222. And they will send you books, free books that he's written. They'll send you free information. He doesn't charge to have a consultation. He can help you if you're located in other states besides Missouri. Just give them a call. See if they can help you. If they're not around and take care of that state, they'll get you somebody that will, just like him. Okay? The second sponsor that we've also had for a long time is Springfield Nissan, Springfield Kia. It used to be Youngblood Motor Group. That's where I bought my last 2 Grand Cherokees. And then I just got through buying on Labor Day a Nissan Sorento SUV 25 and brand new car. And I'm honestly tell you, they've been in business for over 45 years. One of the oldest family-owned dealerships in Southwest Missouri. Now, they sell cars in Arkansas and Kansas, and different places come to buy in Missouri because of not only prices, but more than that, the services that you get from buying from them. So John Whitaker is the owner, and then Aaron Swanson is the number 2 guy. And I'm telling you what, I would tell you that most people would say buying a car is not a good experience. It's not fun. It takes a long time. And I would tell you on Labor Day, I actually wanted to do some other things on Labor Day, but the time that I took to buy that car was very enjoyable. They took care of me, and I love my car. And so I highly recommend these guys. They have new cars on one side of South Campbell, 3525 South Campbell. They have used cars, a lot of certified cars, and they're a great deal for the money. And so we just highly recommend those 2 sponsors. Okay, so I'm going to say, Bill, last words. What do you want to leave with people today?
Well, first of all, I'm excited about coming to the Springfield area. Got lots and lots of friends there, and then again, Bev Allen has the master list of where I'm going to be at. Also, Janet Dabbs is helping to organize this, but I just appreciate you so much for allowing me to be on. This is a critical time for our country and the world. I tell people Trump is not a globalist. He's not part of the one world government group. He's standing in their way. And it's up to us to seize this opportunity. If we don't, and the midterm switch, we could see impeachment trials and this whole thing coming to a screeching halt. This is not the time to sit back. Again, if Charlie were here, he would be focusing on the midterms and making sure that we keep this agenda going, secure the borders and all the rest. But I just appreciate you having me on, and just pray that God bless you. And again, looking forward to seeing all my friends and new friends there in the Springfield area.
Well, Bill, thank you very much for being on today. I'm sorry we only have a short time. I wish we could have hours. I could just sit and listen to you for hours. And I think the listeners today, the people that saw you and listened to you today, they got a glimpse. If they didn't know who Bill Federer was, they do know now. You are the expert on history of all kinds, and you're speaking the truth, and at the most critical time in our history and our lives today. So thank you very much. I hope we can have you on our show. I know you're extremely busy, but anytime that you've got a spare moment, we'd love to have you on our show. There's so much we can talk about and so much that you can share that is extremely important. So God bless you. Travel safe. We'll see you in Missouri.
Yep.
Look forward to it.
Yep.
Thank you.
10 days from now.
All right.
You're in Springfield. We'll look forward to it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
looking forward to it. Thanks. All right. Everyone have a great rest of the week. We will be back next Wednesday.
We're the United States of America. Unity and oneness is what we're made of. One nation under God, it's plain to see. We're showing the whole world what a country should be. United we stand in America, hand in hand in America. Together as one in a land that we love. United we stand in America.